The following podcast has been primarily abstracted from the executive summary of Joint Publication 3-0 titled Joint Operations. Joint Publication 3-0 is the keystone document of the Joint Operations series. It provides the doctrinal foundation and fundamental principles that guide the armed forces of the United States in the conduct of joint operations across the range of military operations. Joint Publication 3-0 discusses the strategic security environment, strategic considerations, and the nature of war as a context for joint operations. Lists the fundamental principles of joint operations. Discusses joint functions in joint operations. Addresses operational art, operational design, joint operation planning, and assessment. Describes the key considerations for the conduct of major operations and campaigns. Discusses the characteristics of and specific considerations for crisis response and limited contingency operations. Addresses the characteristics of and specific considerations for military engagement, security cooperation, and deterrence. The strategic security environment is extremely fluid, with continually changing coalitions, alliances, partnerships, and new national and transnational threats constantly appearing, disappearing, or in remission. The U.S. military is well positioned to conduct operations, but must also be prepared to address emerging peer competitors and irregular, catastrophic, and disruptive challenges. These challenges include irregular warfare, catastrophic terrorism employing weapons of mass destruction, and disruptive threats to U.S. ability to maintain its qualitative edge and to project power. Increasingly, joint operations occur in urban terrain and the information environment. Additionally, the operational area often contains humanitarian crisis conditions requiring humanitarian assistance. In addition to military forces and non-combatants, there may be a large number of other government agencies, international government agencies, non-governmental organizations, regional organizations, and elements of the private sector in the operational area. Traditional war is characterized as a confrontation between nation-states or coalitions, alliances of nation-states. The context of irregular warfare is marked by a violent struggle among state and non-state actors for legitimacy and influence over the relevant population. Irregular warfare favors indirect and asymmetric approaches, though it may employ the full range of military and other capacities in order to erode an adversary's power, influence, and will. In irregular warfare, a less powerful adversary seeks to disrupt or negate the military capabilities and advantages of a more powerful, conventionally armed military force, which often represents the nation's established regime. An adversary using irregular warfare methods typically will endeavor to wage protracted conflicts in an attempt to break the will of the opponent and its population. Irregular warfare typically manifests itself as one or a combination of several possible forms, including insurgency, terrorism, disinformation, propaganda, and organized criminal activity such as drug trafficking. As a nation, the United States wages war employing all instruments of national power, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic, to achieve national strategic objectives. National strategic direction defines the strategic purpose that guides the employment of the military instrument of national power. At the crux of this understanding must be the strategic purpose, which may be attributed to the nature of and goals of the adversary and the system's perspective of the operational environment. Decisive, unified action provides unity of effort focused on those objectives and leads to the conclusion of operations on terms favorable to the United States. The term unified action in military usage is a broad term referring to the synchronization, coordination, and/or integration of the activities of governmental and non-governmental entities with military operations to achieve unity of effort. Combatant commanders play a pivotal role in unifying actions. However, subordinate joint force commanders also integrate and synchronize their operations directly with the activities and operations of other military forces and non-military organizations in the operational area. The United States employs its military capabilities at home and abroad in support of its national security goals in a variety of operations that vary in size, purpose, and combat intensity. The use of joint capabilities in military engagement, security cooperation, and deterrence activities helps shape the operational environment and keeps the day-to-day tensions between nations or groups below the threshold of armed conflict while maintaining U.S. global influence. A crisis response or limited contingency operation can be a single, small-scale, limited-duration operation or a significant part of a major operation of extended duration involving combat. The associated general strategic and operational objectives are to protect U.S. interests and prevent surprise attack or further conflict. When required to achieve national strategic objectives or protect national interests, the U.S. national leadership may decide to conduct a major operation or campaign involving large-scale combat, placing the United States in a wartime state. In such cases, the general goal is to prevail against the enemy as quickly as possible, conclude hostilities, and establish conditions favorable to the host nation and the United States and its multinational partners. Conducting joint operations generally involve 12 broad principles, collectively known as the Principles of Joint Operations. These principles guide warfighting at the strategic, operational, and tactical levels of war. They combine the 9 historical principles of war: objective, offensive, mass, economy of force, maneuver, unity of command, security, surprise, and simplicity, with 3 additional principles born out of experience across the range of military operations: restraint, perseverance, and legitimacy. While there are 12 principles of joint operations, the chief principle for employment of U.S. forces is to ensure achievement of the national strategic objectives through decisive action. The 3 levels of war, strategic, operational, and tactical, help clarify the links between national strategic objectives and tactical actions. The strategic level is that level of war at which a nation, often as a member of a group of nations, determines national or multinational strategic objectives and guidance and develops and uses national resources to achieve those objectives. The operational level links the tactical employment of forces to national and military strategic objectives through the design and conduct of operations using operational art. The tactical level focuses on planning and executing battles, engagements, and activities to achieve military objectives assigned to tactical units or task forces. The first principle in joint force organization is that joint force commanders organize forces to accomplish the mission based on the joint force commander's vision and concept of operations. Joint forces can be established on a geographic or functional basis. A combatant command is a unified or specified command with a broad, continuing mission under a single commander. When authorized, commanders of unified commands may establish subordinate unified commands to conduct operations on a continuing basis in accordance with the criteria set forth for unified commands. A joint task force is a joint force that is constituted and so designated by the Secretary of Defense, a combatant commander, a subordinate unified command commander, or an existing joint task force commander to accomplish missions with specific, limited objectives and which do not require overall centralized control of logistics. The Joint Force Commander's operational environment is the composite of the conditions, circumstances, and influences that affect the employment of capabilities and bear on the decisions of the commander.